So here we are. When last we left, we were talking about Marius, and we called him a novus homo. What is a novus homo? New man. So that's the translation. What is the philosophy of a novus homo?
He didn't really have any political ties before. It's kind of a new face.
Yes, absolutely. So in our last class, we were talking about some modern day novi homines. Do you remember what kind of examples you gave as a novus homo of 2015? Mark Rubio. Yes, he's a good example. George Bush is not novus. He's not novus at all. Bernie Sanders, yes. Yes. Anybody else? From a political standpoint, yes, but from a status standpoint, no. Yes. I don't. All right. Anybody else have a suggestion for a novus homo from our modern era? Yes, that was one of the examples we used last class. President Obama. Ben Carson. Yeah, to be honest, I don't know that much, but I do know that he has a background in medicine, which usually is not related to politics. But yes, he's new as far as the political stage goes. Yes, we mentioned him before. Yes, we right on top of that, Mr. O'Keefe.
He was only given a small loan of $1 million from his father.
Small, actually, like 100.
All right, well, judgments on political candidates notwithstanding, Marius did not have any sort of political influence. Why would this be considered a threat to the Senate? His new ideas, yes. Why else?
His class is seen as sort of like the lower class, like compared to the other politicians that were coming in. So he might not be respected as much as the others.
Okay. Is that a threat, though? We're just going to think about that.
His popularity is...
Yes, he has increased popularity. He's not predictable, right? Because you would have predicted him to be something else than what he rose to. Bridget?
A lot of times they have friends with him, you know how what are they called? The main people? I forget what they're called.
Optimates?
Yeah, the optimates are changed every year.
Oh.
Every,
optimates was not the correct term then.
Oh, okay. They're the two main people.
Consuls.
The consuls, they change
Okay.
every year.
Yes.
Yeah, one person, they'll have two friends and they'll switch on and off, so they always are in power.
Right. Okay, so the idea is that the same people are in power all the time.
Yeah.
And then there's this guy who was never part of that original equation. Okay. Was it another hand up?
I guess corruption.
What about it?
Past rulers could have ties with the Senate so that they were on the same page. This is these rulers not on the same page and doing what they had going before.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the key that you've all been sort of dancing around. They have a system, and the optimates love the system because the system benefits them. He's not part of the existing system, but he got there. This also potentially could open the door to other people entering the system and offsetting the balance that they perceived or the balance that benefited them. So Marius' position was of some controversy for the Romans. A lot of the support that he got came from the military. He was a commander of the army. And he did something rather unique with his soldiers. He promised them that if they fought for him and they were victorious for him, that he would reward them. So he promised them with land and the spoils of war. Whoops. he promised them this land piece, I suppose, when they retired, which is sort of the first documented version of. Did you have a question? Or? It's fine like that. Yeah. Okay, thanks. This is the first edition of a pension system. And pension systems exist even into 2015, whereby when you retire, when you cease working and getting income from working, then you have some sort of, additional income. Yes?
Does this only apply if they survive, or do their parents take benefits?
Great question. I don't necessarily know the answer. I would presume it's only if they survive, though, which does give you some motivation to survive. Also, because if you get land, only men could be landowners at that time. So, there were certain things. You can just kind of leave it if you want. All right. So, the motivation of Marius's soldiers to succeed and to do well for him, as well as, sure, Rome will get the victory too. But their motivation to succeed was greatly increased by the fact that there was some sort of promise. Now, we talked about this with the Rustici, who were hanging around in Rome, and the Gracchi brothers wanted to get them land. If they had a plot of land, and this is what I was just discussing for Ben's question, if a soldier got a plot of land, that would enable him to become a citizen. And if he were a citizen, he would be able to vote. For a soldier, this was really important. Soldiers received a bit of a pittance, but they weren't necessarily landowners at any point in their career. So this was a really landmark decision for Marius to institute. And it was a really beneficial system for the soldiers, too. So by doing this, Marius took his army and essentially made it a professional army. There was more training, there was more will to succeed and ability to succeed. One of the most notable successes of Marius and his army took place in Numidia. Do you remember where Numidia is or was? We talked about it briefly last time. Numidia is in northern Africa. It's just southeast of Carthage. There was a meddlesome king in Numidia, and I say meddlesome because he was just kind of a thorn in Rome's side. And so the king's name was Jugurtha, and Marius and his forces took down Jugurtha. They eliminated what had been, an evident threat to Rome in Numidia. Numidia, you might remember from our previous presentation, because when Carthage got in trouble, if you will, and started the Third Punic War because they invaded Numidia to try to get control of it. So now here's Rome trying to get control of it too. So Marius and his army conquered Jugurtha. Marius at Exercitus. They also celebrated military success in northern Italy. They conquered tribes of Gauls. They conquered the Teutones. So they returned to Rome, and the men are ready to retire. It's been a long campaign, and Marius is ready to offer them the land, and the Senate says no. Remember, the Senate does not like his status, and the Senate does not like Gaius or Tiberius Gracchus trying to give land to people who don't already have land. They like the status quo. So the Senate refuses. What do you think happened as a result, or what do you remember happening? Yes?
Wasn't there like a revolt or
Yeah, I don't know if revolt is quite the right word. But what happened was something in 87 called the Reign of Terror. In which all the soldiers, with Marius's blessing, let's be honest here, engaged in a campaign of intimidating and basically taking Rome by force. So they intimidated all the aristocrats, they took the city by force, and they expressed their desire to be part of the political machine instead of being excluded by the political machine. Marius's soldiers started the first version of something called proscription. Has anybody heard the term proscription or remember it from the reading? No? No, there is a term that has scription in it, but conscription. Right, that's drafting. Yes? Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So proscription, it does have to do with writing. And basically, they named a bunch of people publicly. They had a list that was published. And if you knew or saw these people, because they were on the official proscription list, you were allowed to kill the person and get a reward for it, and or take their property. So it legalized killing and seizing property. Sounds terrifying, doesn't it?
Isn't that bounty hunting?
Yes, it absolutely is bounty hunting. All along, Marius has been consul this whole time. In fact, in 86, he had his unprecedented 7th consulship. He had, though, tons and tons of support, because he had tons of now land-owning soldiers who could elect him over and over and over again. So he created his own political machine. Maybe the Senate was justified in fearing the novus homo that we speak of. Around the same time, we have a story that intersects with Marius' story. And this deals with a guy by the name of Sulla. Sulla, just for the record, was not a novus homo or a popularis. He was an optimate. Do you remember the basic political philosophy of the optimates? Do you want to look in your notes?
So was Marius an optimate or popularis?
Popularis.
Okay.
Yeah, because he sought to change things for people. It's just that the people he changed things for were not peasants, they were soldiers. Yeah, if you don't mind. Yes, yes. So Sulla is from the ruling class, and he believes that things should stay the way they are, and we shouldn't change our rules and regulations. That said, Sulla was an officer in Marius's army. And at some point, as you might remember, or as you could probably see the writing on the wall, Sulla turned against Marius. And the moment at which the two parted ways, violently, was over a separate situation. Here's the separate situation. King Mithridates was the king of Pontus. There were actually many Mithridates in Pontus. Pontus is located by the Black Sea, and King Mithridates was troublesome to the Romans. He had a really good army, and he wanted to start controlling areas of Rome that they thought they had conquered, and he tried to take some of their territories back. Nobody liked Mithridates. And so the Senate decided that a Roman army should go and try to make war upon Mithridates. I mean, this is Rome. This is what they do. They make war on people, right, to try to conquer them. And so Sulla was sent to take care of the Mithridates problem. He was dealing with it. He was being, successful, I suppose. But then Marius came around and took control of the Roman military campaign and took it away from Sulla. He did it rather by force, as you can imagine. Sulla's response was, while Marius was at the Black Sea, having taken Sulla's campaign from him, Sulla's solution was that back in Rome, he seized the city. He took it by force. And he essentially became a dictator. As dictator, he exiled Marius so that Marius would no longer be welcome in Rome or its surrounding areas. Don't mess with Sulla, man. He will get you. After he exiled Marius, Sulla took it upon himself to go to Pontus and finish what he started with King Mithridates. Makes sense. Like the wonderfully logical soap opera that was Roman politics, while Sulla was away in Pontus, guess who came back to town? Marius. Exactly.
This literally is a soap opera.
It is. It absolutely is. You could not have written a better script.
Does he take Rome?
He does, and he takes it by force again. This is when he got his 7th consulship that we spoke of earlier. So he comes back to Rome with his army, gets re-voted in by, that's right, his army, and shows Sulla, don't mess with Marius either. Sulla came back. He wasn't happy. I know, surprise face, right? So Sulla began proscription for Marius's followers. So he turned the table on poor Marius. Now, one of the interesting things that Sulla did at this time, too, was that he eliminated a really key feature of the Republic. And that was that in the past, a tribune had the ability to bring a bill to the Senate to be passed. This is what got us into this, well, down this road to begin with. Tiberius Gracchus was a tribune. He was the one who introduced the land reform bill to the Senate. So Sulla took away this particular privilege, or capacity at least. He really meant business. He didn't want any of these reformers taking away what he thought should be our, same government as we've always had. It seems like Sulla's a really evil guy, right? I think you're all a little bit, at least, on team go home, Sulla. But then Sulla does something that gets him the love and the praise and the worship of Romans around the world. He retires voluntarily. Phew. Thank you. Who's the other really popular person who retired voluntarily from his dictatorship? No? Cincinnatus. Yes. Cincinnatus was the guy in 5th century BC Rome, one of the first dictators, who's called to deal with his emergency situation. And then the Romans were so pleased with his performance that they said, "Oh, come on down to Rome, be part of our government." And Cincinnatus said, "No, thank you. I'd like to return to my farm." And the Romans were not only stunned, but madly in love with the dedication of such a man who would rather farm than be part of politics. Say it again?
He's trying to grow his crop.
He is. He's just trying to do what he wants to do, what he feels called to do. And he doesn't feel called for government. And Sulla here took the high road too and said, "Yeah, I may have killed hundreds of people. I'm just going to go home. Relax for a little while." It seems out of character, and yet it got him the appreciation and the love of lots and lots of Romans. All right, which brings us to the next in our series of optimates, whose name is Pompey. So his name is Pompey. The city that was devastated by Mount Vesuvius is spelled differently. Pompeii. People sometimes confuse them. So I just thought I'd put that out there. This is Pompeii, and then there's Pompeii. One of the closest side streets to where my grandmother has lived my whole life is Pompey Avenue. I couldn't be happier. All right. Now, Pompey is he's a really complicated character in general. He was the one who gave Sulla an army. Sorry, that should be a capital S. When he fought against Marius. When he seized Rome, he got more armed forces courtesy of Pompey. He also supported Sulla by killing lots and lots of people who were sympathetic to Marius. When Marius was fighting Sulla, he helped to kind of take out their forces. Because of his efforts taking down Team Marius, he was given a new cognomen. Do you remember what a cognomen is? You're nodding. It's a cognomen. Yeah, last name, basically. Who was the other person that we talked about in the first part of this who got a new cognomen for his military efforts? You know him. Well, he fought Hannibal. Scipio, right. What did Scipio's cognomen, or what kind of cognomen did he get?
Great.
No?
Alexander the Great.
Wrong civilization, sorry. Well, whom did he conquer? Africanus, very good. I knew you'd get there. I knew your brain was working toward that. So Pompey was given a new cognomen of Magnus. What does Magnus mean? The Great. So he went from being just plain old Gnaeus Pompeius to being Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus. It's quite a title to bestow on a person. Anybody live in the Somerville area? My parents are friendly with the family who owns that humongous white Great Pyrenees, and his name is Magnus. Yeah, you've seen him. Say it again? Okay. Yes. My parents have a half Great Pyrenees. He's not quite as big. Magnus is enormous, though. But apparently he's just like a lump of love. Like he just sits around. He's a lazy bum. And his hair weighs a lot, so every summer he gets a little trim, a little summer trim, and he like looks like a different dog. All right, so anyway, that's your neighborhood Magnus. But here we have Pompeius Magnus. In 77 BC, Pompeius Magnus returned from Spain. And he got to Rome just in time. In time for what, you might ask? There was the most famous Servile War occurring at that time. Does anyone know who led the very famous Servile War? Yes. Yes. So Spartacus was probably the most famous slave slash gladiator. He and other slaves were at a gladiator school in Capua, and they escaped. And then they started traversing Rome in droves. And they were making war upon the politicians and generally the system that kept them enslaved. And they actually terrorized Rome for quite some time. So here's the Servile War. It's been going on for a long time. There's a guy, another general, whose name is Crassus. Crassus has been doing a heck of a job against the slaves. He and his soldiers have been quelling all these revolutions all around Italy that were brought to you by Spartacus. Pompey comes back to Italy at just the right time, and he enters Italy for the very last battle against Spartacus. And seeing as how he is Pompeius Magnus, he takes the credit for the win against Spartacus. Seems like a pretty ballsy maneuver. But hey, he's Pompeius the Great, right? Somehow, and this seems sort of strange, but somehow Pompey and Crassus were able to put their troubles behind them, if you will. And not much later in life, Pompey and Crassus got together. Whoops. To become a formidable force in government. I think I have too many loops in my M, but you know what I'm talking about. They were elected consuls together. That's what I mean by they were teamed up in government. Not bad, right? Have the ability to move on. Which is going to set the stage for our next series of conflicts. So we'll go back to that in 1 second. Also in Pompey news, because he's Magnus, in 67, Pompey managed to defeat the pirates. There were lots of pirates in all over the Mediterranean. So there were people who would attack these trade ships and take the cargo that was on board, the money that was on board, whatever it was. And pirates had been a pressing problem for Rome for years and years and years. So Pompey was given the opportunity to have this campaign, and not for nothing, he defeated them. Whoops, yes. How many months did it take him to defeat them? 3 months. Right. So he made Rome feel safer. He gained territory for them. He made them feel safer from Marius. Pompey was kind of a good guy in Rome. People liked him a lot. Crassus liked him enough to become partners in a government sense. And we're going to be seeing more of Pompey as we move forward. But we're going to take a little break from taking notes at least.